Sometimes life is yikes.
And that's okay. You're not alone. Welcome to Yikesland. Hi, guys, and welcome to Yikesland. I am your host, Chris Fung, along with my co-host.
It's Jelani Hoon.
We are bringing you the views from Yikesland on all things depression and mental health and OCD and therapy and hydration. And
Correct. That is correct.
Yeah. Stay hydrated. I was going to say stay thirsty, but that's the opposite. That's wrong.
That's, yeah.
And my ongoing
so many things.
quest to make the basketball noise correctly. Nope, that's not it.
That's not it.
We would love for you guys to reach out to us on Twitter and Facebook. You can also find us on Instagram at Yikesland_podcast, or go old school and shoot us an email at yikesland@gmail.com. I never thought I would live long enough for Gmail to be the old school thing, but it is. We should get a Snapchat.
Maybe.
Maybe we'll get a Snapchat.
Maybe we will.
This episode is brought to you by Sad Boy Tees. It's a t-shirt with a happy face on the front, and then when you're sad but you have to pretend to be happy, you pull the shirt over your face.
Oh.
That is not a real sponsor. But if you guys want to invent that, be my guest.
That seems... I'm seeing how I'm looking. How does that shirt work?
You just pull it up over your stomach will be exposed, but you pull the shirt up so the face is over your face.
Okay.
Listen, I only had 30 seconds to think of this fake sponsor and surprise you with it, so I'll work on it.
I love the sponsor already, and I hope that you end up creating this company.
Yeah. Sad Boy Tees. And the boy is with 2 eyes, obviously, because it's the gender neutral form of boy.
That's right. That's correct. Yeah, folks, thank you so much for joining us here. Again, it's another great Tuesday with you guys here in Yikesland. We want you guys making it to every Tuesday with us, not just so you can listen to the podcast, but we want you here in Yikesland with us because it's important that we feel that you're here with us together as a community here, growing with us and just being with us in the world here, because a world without you would be a lesser world, and we don't want that. We want you being here with us somewhere out there and being connected with us in some way. So please reach out, and we love all of you. So let's start the podcast out. I'm doing it this time.
Oh boy.
How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I've been extremely busy bopping around type of thing, which is my favorite version of me because I don't have time to be sad.
Okay.
I've been doing lots of things. I went to State Fair 3 times.
The Wisconsin State Fair,
yes.
Which, I mean, every state has a state fair, but yes. I mean,
I went to a mystery state fair. It was actually an estate fair for old people who have died.
Okay.
I don't know why I'm so full of jokes today.
I love them. I love them all.
Yeah. I went to the Wisconsin State Fair many times. I ate a lot of corn, which is my favorite.
That's probably the only reason I go. Yeah,
I concretely thought to myself, I'm so glad I didn't kill myself before I got to eat this corn. Every time. That's how good the corn is. And I also did a dragon boat festival race.
Now, explain this to me, because I saw you posting pictures,
yes.
And I was like, she seems like she's getting out there and having
fun.
I
seemed like a real person, right?
I mean, you're real to me, damn it.
So dragon boat racing is ancient Chinese secret. No, but it's the modern version is based on an old tradition where it's almost like you've seen canoe racing. So it's very long boats, but they're painted to look like dragons. There's usually scales on the side, and then there's a dragon, a tail and then a head. And the head is it's like the head of in lion dancing.
Yeah.
So it's that style, and it might have a beard or something. Some of them are more intricate, some of them are less intricate. But then it's become a modern, competitive sport for people of all races to do together.
Okay.
But there's actually a really big breast cancer survivor, dragon boat racing thing that happens, a phenomenon. So that's pretty cool. So there's some teams that are really competitive that practice like all year round. There were people that had come from, I think, Iowa and the greater Chicago area. And so like some people are super competitive about this because it's a very difficult sport if you're doing it intensely, because obviously it's rowing. And so it's both using your arms and your core a bunch, but then also just what it does to your heart in terms of cardio.
Okay. Yeah, well, yeah, because
you kind of feel like you might die a little bit while it's happening, because it's a little bit like sprinting, where the races are pretty short. They're like between 100 and 500 meters usually.
Okay, yeah.
So it's not like you have a really long time. It's not like a marathon situation where you have a long time to catch up. It's like, you better do good all right now. Oh, you didn't do good? Well, it's too late. The race is over. That's fun because I always like emotionally, I always like a sprinting situation. But then I've never done this before. So that's another thing that always makes me feel good, is trying something new and being like, oh, I'm glad I'm not dead. I got to find out that there's this in the world. And so I ended up getting like suckered onto a team because they needed more women on the team. And I was like, cool. 1, a situation where you need more women, I'm in. But 2, Asian stuff. And 3, weird forms of exercise. So it's kind of everything I like in a situation.
All wrapped into like one.
But I was on a more casual team where you only practice one time, kind of, and then you just go and you see how well you do, which is also kind of fun. The concept of, we talked in the previous episode about the concept that I struggle with, and I think a lot of people struggle with perfectionism, where you're like, well, I don't want to do it at all if I'm not going to be the best, or I'm not going to be perfect.
Yeah. So
it's always like fun for me and a good exercise if I'm doing something that I am bad, quote unquote, bad at, and that I know that I'm going to be bad at, but I do it anyway. And like, I don't want to say force myself to enjoy it, because I did naturally enjoy it. Like I naturally had a lot of fun. But in a way, it involves a trickery of my brain, because in my head, I think everything you do, you're supposed to be the best at. But in real life, nobody's going to be the best at everything. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try doing stuff. So it was a fun experience on its face. Like saying I did dragon boat racing is fun to people. But then there's a lot of stuff that, with my personality and my mindscape and the Yikesland that goes on up here, there's a lot of like stuff that was good for me about doing that. And it was a whole festival with food and meeting new people, and getting to be around some of the Asian community in this area, because when I first moved to Milwaukee, I had a lot of trouble finding other Asian people to be around. And there is an Asian community here, especially in the greater Milwaukee area, but it wasn't immediately apparent to me when I moved downtown, and that was kind of shocking coming from living in New York, or like being in Hong Kong, and then being like, where is everybody? So that's been a lot of fun. So yeah, I've been out and about enough to kind of keep me distracted from having time to get sad or get in my own head, and that's been really nice.
That's good. I mean, I'm glad that you were able to like get out there and like get out of like the zone of like being inside, trapped in our heads. Like we're sometimes we usually get. Yeah, that's pretty good. It's good. Yeah. I'm glad. I'm happy for you.
Well, how have you been?
Yeah, I've been doing pretty good. This past week has been kind of interesting for me. So last week I talked about like I was recovering a little bit from the convention.
Your odd pre-con flu.
Yes, the pre-con flu and the con, like
patient
getting
zero.
Run over. I was
If you think about it though, somebody has to start the con flu. Like I understand that it's partially just an exhaustion and dehydration thing, but at the same time, there has to be a patient zero.
Yeah,
I think you were patient zero.
It's possible that I
one who spread it over the weekend to everyone else.
I made that joke too on one of the other podcasts, where I was like, yeah, I was looking down my list and all the stuff I have, and I was like, hand sanitizer. I'm patient zero. How are you? But yeah, it's after recovering from that, coming into this week, I've been kind of I guess weirdly motivated to do a couple of different things. I changed up kind of my routine a little bit, and I actually got out and started like kind of exercising a little bit.
Awesome.
So like one of the things that I guess in my mind had always held me back from doing, like, because I this kind of touches on my kind of like New Year's resolutions that we made way back when, but I want to get back into doing some exercise stuff, but it just ended up like never happening for me. I just like
Sure.
always find an excuse and this and that. The biggest one in my head was whenever you come back into like exercising or doing something like that, like you always have like that preliminary like, oh, I'm gonna die, like why did I do this again, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and then eventually you get over that hurdle and then like everything kind of just stays normal, consistent. And so the idea popped in my head of like, oh, I just had a convention weekend where I walked 43 miles. I was already run over and I was sick and I recovered from that. And so like I put it in my head that I was like, I already had the preliminary like hurdle,
Yeah.
right? Of like all the soreness of feeling run over and like all like lumped into like one weekend. And so for me, I was like, okay, let me just like start doing some cardio and stuff, right? Because that's what I was doing a lot. And so I've been kind of taking the mornings after I get out from work, because I work third shift currently, and so I'll arrive back at my place about 7 in the morning, and then I'll just kind of just end up like doing some cardio around like the area since it's still very nice out. And so kind of like start kind of doing like a brisk, I don't want to say power walk, so I'm gonna say manly speed jog.
The old MS.
No, but yeah, I've been doing actually kind of just like walking through the trails and kind of just like actually just moving a lot. And so I've been doing that a little bit, like trying to like start my cardio stuff a little bit more and start doing some like little bit of like self-care, like back into it again, because it's been a little bit
outside too, just to be outside,
yeah,
and to remember that like, yes, world is bigger than I thought it was.
Yeah, so
bad thing happened and good thing happened and I survived.
Oh yeah. And so I've been doing the thing that you think is very weird, where I end up just like hiking through the trails around here, because there's a couple trails around here, and walking and listening to music and just kind of just like taking like the moments and just enjoying stuff and like looking sullenly off to the distance.
That's great. It's not weird to me. It's like I'm envious of a situation where you can kind of have chill about doing something like that. That's all it is.
Yeah,
is that I know my brain is the one who is doing a thing, but at the same time I'm like, oh man, how does he live that way? And I'm jealous of it. But I'm glad that, and this goes back to what I was talking about on the previous episode about intentional movement, where, you know, it doesn't have to be that you're like sprinting or like running a marathon or whatever every time you exercise. Sometimes it's just intentional movement. Like even if you're going out there and maybe you're not quite jogging, that's fine. You know, you're still like
I'm not hard running or something like that. I'm not doing like the Rocky thing where I'm just like you know, I'm just, I have a
feeling he only did that for the length of time that was necessary to get
the shot. But I've been doing like the thing of like, you know, I'm gonna do some what did you call it? Intentional movement. I'm gonna take a hike through. I'm gonna walk through the trails. I'm gonna, you know, go through and just keep walking for, you know, an hour, maybe 2 hours or something like that, and kind of just enjoy, because I feel like what I've been doing a lot lately is just shutting myself, you know, off a little bit here and there, and then not really enjoying, I guess, the clouds. I don't know what you want to call it, you know, like just being chill about the moment. And so
and why ruin? I think we tend, especially in today's like exercise culture, to like ruin the concept of exercise for ourselves, where we're like, if you don't do it this way, it's not good enough. And you might as well stay home.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could do other things to liven it up here and there. There's like I know that like there are a couple like fun little apps that you could put on your phone, and like they're kind of like geo-synced to your phone. So like there's one that I remember using back in the day when I did kind of move around a lot and kind of jog a little bit. There was one where it would be a game where it's all audio and it sounds like zombies are chasing after you.
I was just about to suggest that yeah. So that's funny.
And so like you have to like you actually have to speed up if you hear them coming closer, and this, you're not looking at your phone, you're kind of just like, oh god, I can hear, oh no. But I guess I could liven it up here and there with that kind of thing. But at the moment I'm kind of just, I guess, living in the moment, chilling out, and kind of just like doing the movement that I need to feel like I'm actually burning some calories, doing some things like that. I'm not counting calories, of course, and I'm not doing a bunch of things like that, but I'm actually trying to get back into some of the old ways, and doing some other things. So I have been doing a lot more, getting out there a little bit more, doing, kind of enjoying the world a little bit. So it's been interesting. It's been an interesting change. So adapting, changing, doing what you will.
Yeah.
Since I touched on a little bit of my New Year's resolution thing here, how are everything's going with yours?
Well, I actually have a New Year's resolution update.
Oh.
Which is that one of my New Year's resolutions had been to get back into therapy. And so I have done that. I'm actually going to therapy right after this podcast.
Which is just like double the dose.
Yeah, it is. It is. That'll be. It's good because I'm warmed up about talking about my feelings.
Good.
So I'll get in there and I'll be extra good at therapy. No, but I'm proud that I started going again. It was a really big mental hurdle for me to start going again because, like I've expressed about the podcast, sometimes when you talk about hard stuff, sometimes you walk away feeling like, awesome, I confronted that and I'm doing good. And sometimes even if the experience was still good for you, you walk away really, really drained, like, oh my god, I just want to sleep for the rest of this day because I just did such hard emotional work. I don't want to think about it, I don't want to talk about it. Like, I'm tired. Like doing a sprint but emotionally. And so it was kind of a big hurdle for me just to think about whether I was strong enough to be able to do that stuff. But at the same time, doing the podcast was a really good kind of warm up for that, where I am forced to talk about not forced, but like I force myself to talk about hard things and emotional things and open up about them and try to be articulate about them. And so I think that has really benefited my work in therapy and made it easier to get back into that, where I'm kind of already, it's easy to live our lives in this like shutdown mode where we don't want to bother anybody, so we don't really talk about our feelings too much, or maybe we occasionally text about them, but to speak out loud openly about them is kind of hard. So I'm grateful to have this space to do kind of that work that allowed me to get back to being able to talk about stuff in therapy. So I have done a good New Year's resolution.
Good.
Hooray.
I'm glad. I'm proud and happy that you're like getting back, into doing something that you had wanted to do and get back into. And I know that, like, again, being open and so like this podcast, like you said, sometimes it can be hard. Sometimes it's talking about things that you really don't want to like confront always, and sometimes when you do, you feel great about it. Sometimes you feel drained talking about certain subjects because you can relate to them like more often than not. But it's important, I feel, that like we and everyone out there in like the Yikesland community, like who are dealing with like mental health issues like this, that like the biggest thing that you can do, and whether it makes, sometimes it can feel draining and sometimes it can feel great, is like talking is something that like we end up backing out of very easily, like in any situation. Like I sometimes someone will ask you how you're doing and you just want to brush them off real quick, or you want to like, it's like I don't want to talk about it or something like that, and kind of just shut yourself off. And that eventually will catch up to you, where it's like you just end up feeling more and more isolated in your own mind. And talking about it, like sometimes it can feel very heavy and sometimes it can feel like you're doing a lot, and it's hard. It's very hard work to do that, but like letting it flow, talking about your emotions and things like that, it's never wrong to do that, guys. It's something that like we all have to get used to, because I guess maybe it's something left over from long ages past where, you know, people were just like, oh, talking about your emotions and stuff like that, like that's not something you do, you know, like, you know, cover it up, don't show the public, don't show the world about it. But like at the end of the day, like, you know, that mentality has gotten us where we are right now. You know, that's, you know, we got to be able to be open about it, be able to talk about it. Like this, you know, the stigma behind like talking about depression, that's like one of the things right there, where it's no one really wants to talk about it because they always think it's like a taboo thing to talk about. And that's why, you know, for us here, we want to be open about it, and we want people to relate to us. You know, maybe you won't, and not everyone out there will have the same experience or the same thing that they're dealing with, but in some way can make them look at what they're dealing with. And that's what we hope for with this podcast, where we're like, when we talk and make them think, make people relate, or not relate, but also like kind of make them think on what they're dealing with at the same time. Like either way, it's something we want to do. And I'm glad that you're able to get back into, you know, this has, you know, this little podcast here that we started, like, and we've done a handful of episodes here and there, and has gotten you to a place where you're able to, you know, open up more and more and more, and then you're able to get back into a place where you're comfortable with talking again in like a safe space in a therapy session. So that's great. I mean, things have been going. How long have you been going back?
It'll be my third, so it's 3 weeks now.
Okay.
That been going once a week, and hopefully can keep that up. Obviously, it's hard with schedules and with work schedules, so sure. That's like my fear, and I'm going to say it out loud in order to hope that it doesn't come true.
Well, I believe in you.
It's just that scheduling is difficult, but
I believe in you. I know you'll be able to do it. I know you're strong enough to do it. I think we're all strong enough to talk and do things like this. So I'm glad that you're taking those steps. Pretty proud.
Thank you.
Yeah. Shall we go into the topic of the week?
Yeah.
Would you like to intro it?
So our topic of the week is something that I think we've kind of touched on in the past, but in a short catchphrasey way. I was jokingly calling it your feelings are valid ... but are they?
Mm-hmm.
And now this is a topic that we've been talking about doing for a while, but we wanted to make sure that we handled it with sensitivity and with nuance, because we're definitely not here to invalidate anyone's feelings or minimize anyone's feelings or tell anybody else that the way that we are currently thinking about this, and I think we'll probably have slightly different viewpoints, but
for sure.
The way that we're currently thinking about this, or the things that we're saying, are the end all be all of how to handle your feelings. You know, we're not mental health professionals, but we're also just at specific individual places in our Yikesland timeline and or journey and or path that is definitely not linear. And so we kind of held off on talking about this, even though it's a very kind of common saying in mental health landia, because we wanted to make sure that we kind of got it right for you guys.
Yeah, and so this topic here is it's a sensitive one, because there's like this whole kind of like divide where people believe whether or not like they dealing with mental health issues and things like that, and there's a divide with people who believe that if you're having these different like outburst or things like that you're feeling, and sometimes some people, and I think we touched about a little bit on it, of like when we talked about the like negativity, about like the outer negativity and the words that people can say, it comes down to that, where like people don't understand it sometimes, and some people think that like, oh, you know, you're going too far, or you're outbursting too much, or like it's not something like that. And at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, like depending on like what's going on in that person's life, that person's time, like sometimes they can't always control how they're feeling, right? Especially with like us, where we deal with depression, where our emotions are all out of whack, you know, and sometimes they catch up to us here and there. But it's important to understand that like when you're dealing with somebody who is dealing with mental health issues, it's important to not only understand and respect that like aspect of it, and understand that like sometimes they're not always going to be emotionally open sometimes, or emotionally I don't want to say unstable or anything like that, but and at the end of the day, sometimes that they may have something wrong going on with them that's triggering them, that's causing them to act a certain way, or like unleash an emotion that that they cannot control at the moment. But at the same time, it's about us coming to an understanding, and like looking at it from a certain point of view where we have to really like understand and respect what's going on with them. Because if we end up always just kind of just like, oh, like you're just outbursting, you're having a tantrum or something like that, or things like that, like it ends up like causing this kind of rift between inside of a person who's like dealing with it, and like sometimes they can't, sometimes it gets to be too much, or things are overwhelming, and then if you're piling on this stuff of like you're not being understanding about it, it becomes kind of a big issue for them.
Well, I think you can end up isolating somebody and making them feel worse. And I think to the latter half of your point, I think it's easy if you're not the one who's feeling a thing to look at somebody else, especially say I was doing something that, like, you and I are having a conversation, and then I'm on my phone and I'm like texting or scrolling through Instagram or something while we're talking. And that could just be a rude behavior, but then and like you could look at that and be like, why is she doing that? Mm. And that could just be a rude behavior. Like, I don't care what you what you have to say. But then it could also be like a situation where I'm feeling really, I'm having a really hard time concentrating on only one thing. And so it helps me to be scrolling through or doing something else with my hands while I'm having this conversation with you, because for some reason I'm unable to concentrate on only the one thing. And I think that example, I use that example to kind of show that sometimes it's a situation where you're looking at somebody else and their behavior or what they're saying, their thoughts and feelings are, and you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense to you because you're you, and you're not quite seeing all the inputs that they have. So it's not necessarily that their feeling or their action doesn't make sense. It's just that you're not seeing all the inputs. And I think that's where a lot of othering behavior and a lot of isolating behavior can kind of come from, where if you're not familiar with what that person is going through or how somebody's brain works when they have or when they're dealing with a particular thing, you can kind of look at their behavior and be like, oh, that's rude, or that's weird, or that's crazy. But it does make sense in their head because they have different like inputs than you're able to see.
Yeah. I mean, like for me, like an example for me, I think that comes to mind is like sometimes an emotion, I get overwhelmed with emotion, and I'll be doing just a normal task or something like that. Maybe I'll be at work. It's actually happened to me a couple times at work, where I will be overcome with an emotion, and it's kind of like a distraught emotion sometimes, and I can't describe it. Nothing's happening at work that's causing this to happen. I mean, of course, I hate work, but even that's whatever. Everyone feels like that. But all of a sudden, like I'll just feel like super anxious, feel like something's really wrong, and then like I'll have like this thing where I'll kind of just like, I gotta take a moment, and so I mean, there's been a couple times where it's this emotion has come over me, and I'll just have like kind of like tears coming down my face, and I can't like understand it. Sometimes it's not like I'm having a panic attack or something like that, but it's this emotion that comes over me, and sometimes like it's happened to me a few times here and there, but it's like, for me, that to an outside person, that makes no sense, right? It's like, what's going on? Are you okay? Someone else might even think like something's really wrong that's going on, that someone like, but at the end of the day, it's just, for me, I'm not understanding I'm not understanding, not able to control what's going on with my emotions, because of course I deal with depression, I deal with anxiety, and sometimes I get overcome with this emotion that just kind of comes and goes here and there, and I have to deal with it in a certain way, and try and for me focus in on what's going on. And I call it anchoring myself here and there and kind of thinking about different things. And sometimes this emotion is overwhelming, sometimes it's too much. I mean, I talked about like a few episodes ago where I had an outside incident that happened that caused me to completely shut down and implode into myself. And no matter what, even though people were trying to help me, I couldn't focus. I couldn't see everything that was going on around me because it felt like everything was so loud. And while this all may seem to the outside and to the person looking in that doesn't make sense to them or this and that, it's for me this all kind of makes sense in my head, the way I describe it, the way I and kind of approach it in my head of how I see it happen, how I can understand it, and how I'm able to describe it. For me, I'm trying to describe it as easy as I can right now, where I have to anchor myself, I have to bring myself down, I have to understand what's going on in my life, I have to bring myself into a point where I can stabilize what's all going all out of whack in my head, with the emotion sometimes. But it comes over me and it may not make sense to other people, but at the end of the day, I would for me, hopefully, that people can understand that what I'm dealing with isn't something that is something that it is abnormal, I guess. I would hope that people are understanding what I'm dealing with is something that other people out there can relate to, that other people have understand that maybe that they deal with as well in some sort of way, maybe not the same exact way, but where they have this emotion come over them, or they have things that trigger this, and that sorry, that I hope that they can understand it is what I'm looking at. Because one of the things that comes with oh, your emotions are valid, a lot of people come and argue against it because they don't understand it.
Yeah, and I think, maybe people don't necessarily need to understand your specific emotion and all the things that came into it in order to accept it. And that's maybe where I would like to see people moving as a society, is you don't have to understand everything that a person's been through. You don't have to have been through that stuff yourself. You don't even need to be perfect at empathizing at what that might be like. But if you can just accept that the way that they're reacting, which might look weird to you, is just a product of whatever struggle or whatever inputs are happening in their head, and you just accepting that that's the best they can do.
Yeah, I guess the word I should have been using is accept.
Kind of a
acceptance on it, not understanding.
Yeah. But I think, so you see a lot of, we're all exposed to Tumblr, but you see a lot of on Tumblr and Twitter and
Instagram and stuff
accounts and stuff, posts that are in the mental health meme world, which I think we both are.
Yes.
You'll see a lot of posts about kind of titled "Your feelings are valid" and don't ever let anybody invalidate your feelings, and you're allowed to feel whatever you feel, and that's fine. And I think that's part of what sparked these conversations, was thinking about in what situations do we agree with that or not agree with that, or how does that function for us? And I think for me, it's an important distinction to make, to say that I'm never here to invalidate somebody else's feelings, but then there is for sure the statement "your feelings are valid" isn't necessarily a blanket statement that I take as true within myself, where sometimes, because I do know what's going on in my own head world, sometimes I want to feel an emotion and let it kind of emotions happen, they're just a reaction to things, but sometimes I want to feel an emotion and be observant of it, be yes, you are feeling sad about this, but then have a second check that's but does this make sense? Does this reflect reality? So sometimes I'm kind of an anxious person in relationships. Surprise, surprise. So I'll accidentally feel sad that either a friend or a partner doesn't pay attention to me or doesn't love me enough or whatever, based on like nothing, based on like I asked them a question and they didn't respond with the exact tone that I expected, and then I feel rejected for no reason. And so like a place where I would not use the phrase my feelings are valid is there, where it does not mean that I'm not allowed to temporarily feel the feeling of rejection and sadness. But then in my own world, I don't want that to be where it ends. I don't want myself to be like, okay, that's valid, so it must be true. Like, I don't want to both think that's both valid and justified, and I'm going to take that and act on it. And so I want there to be that second check where I'm like, okay, so you're feeling this way because this thing happened, and that's okay. But do you want to continue feeling that way? Does it make sense based on what's happening around you and what you know to be true about how people feel about you? No. And so I think that that's the argument that sometimes people get into, where they're like, well, just because you're saying your feelings are valid, but that doesn't mean they're all true, or that doesn't mean they're all justified. And you don't necessarily want to take everything that you're feeling and then act on it. And I think that's a difference too, where, you know, just because somebody made you angry doesn't mean that it's okay to lash out at them emotionally or physically ever, or something like that. And so like hearing your feelings are valid doesn't necessarily mean that it's okay to kind of push that onto somebody else. And so that's a little bit of nuance too that I think is really important, where we don't want to tell people that they're not allowed to feel angry, because feeling angry is a human emotion, and trying to stifle people's anger can also be dangerous. And trying to stifle your own anger without like investigating where that came from can also just like lead stuff to like kind of build up inside you. But at the same time, if you're like telling me like, I'm really angry at so and so, and you're operating under this, and my feelings are valid, and so I'm gonna like yell at them, you know, that's like a separate step that obviously you shouldn't be yelling at other adults. And so that's like a separate step that kind of people argue against, as a counter argument to the sentiment that your feelings are valid, because they're like, well, if your feelings are valid, then wouldn't it mean that you should act on them? And the answer is no, you shouldn't always act on them, because sometimes you'll harm or scare other people, or sometimes it's not productive. And so I think that it might be a case where it's the phrasing of your, like, quote unquote, your feelings are valid, that's leading to all these people arguing against the sentiment. Because it's sort of presented as if it's this blanket permission to act however you want based on however you are feeling, or to take as truth anything that you are feeling. And there's a common saying that I think a lot of people, my therapist has not said this, but a lot of people post on Tumblr and stuff that their therapist tells them feelings are not facts. And I think that's kind of an important thing to remember too, when we're talking about your feelings are valid. Kind of means to me it's okay to feel the thing, but it doesn't mean it's true to feel the thing. Because if I were to take my feeling that like nobody loves me, like that feeling is valid in that I'm allowed to feel it and I shouldn't be judged for feeling it. But is it a true feeling? No, it's not true that nobody loves me.
Yeah, it's a very sensitive subject. It's tough because, like you said, like, you know, there's a clear, maybe not so clear because there's an argument about it, but between like the feelings and the actions, right? Obviously, you don't want to always act on everything that happens.
And even actions doesn't have to be physical stuff, but even projecting projecting that into the world or saying stuff to people. Yeah.
But is it okay? I mean, is it valid for you to feel the things that you're feeling? Like there's sometimes you can't control like your feelings sometimes. Sometimes like I have a family member, right, who went through a as a young child went through a devastating thing, like where they were kind of in like in a war zone situation, and were a refugee and everything like that. And I, like, for me, I believe wholeheartedly that, like, to like at this moment, that like they something affected them,
Yeah.
and they have kind of like an anger issue where sometimes like they cannot control like how, like, the when they fly off, right? And I, in my mind, I understand what's going on. I know that this is related here, right? And the feelings that they're feeling is understandable. I understand why they're feeling it, and it's valid to them. But then, like, the actions that come out of that, like, it's hard to justify them. Like, if this anger, right? Of course, anger is probably one of the, the hardest ones to stifle if you're gonna like act on them or not. But like the outbursting of anger or something that happens, like, it's hard to come back from like actions that come out of that, and the actions that come from like a place of anger like that, I don't think are valid. But I understand where the feelings are coming from. I understand that you can't control them. They can't control them, and so it's it's not a thing where you just like you shove it off to like, oh, you shouldn't just be just feeling these things. Those things are just, it's that's not coming to an understanding or accepting it. To family member, I accept what this is. Do I end up like understanding the actions that come from it? Like, not always, but again, I understand where the place it's coming from. And that's what I would hope that everyone goes into, where it's like there's a difference between someone having feelings and understanding that they are valid to them, right? Like, they can't, like, for me, like, if I feel something, like, or if I'm feeling alone, and I'm surrounded by friends or something like that, like, that's just like a feeling that I feel, and it's something that's valid to me. But like you said, is it a true feeling? Is it no, it's not. But at the same time, like, I'm not going to act on it or something like that if I can. But if I do, then that's a different difference between feeling and action.
Yeah.
So,
and just because it's not true or not the truth doesn't mean that it came from nowhere.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff that we feel, we do know where it comes from. We're like, oh, I felt insulted when somebody said this because I already have a sensitivity about blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody like makes fun of me for sleeping in late, I already have a sensitivity where I think that I am like lazy and horrible for not waking up super early and getting more work done. And like, does that make any sense? No, I don't know why I do that to myself, but I already have a sensitivity about it. So if somebody's like, oh, you slept in late, I'm like, and like that feeling comes from somewhere. And a lot of our feelings come from like stuff that we've built up in our heads, ways that we criticize ourselves, ways that we've received criticism in the past or previous trauma. And some of it we might not even be able to remember. Like sometimes you just start feeling really physically stressed out.
Yeah.
And especially when I was in the Great Depression, sometimes I would just be crying at nothing. Like, yeah, I was generally sad, but then like I would start weeping and like my roommate would be like, why are you, like, is something wrong? And I'd be like, I don't know, it's nothing. Like, it, whatever it is not at the surface level of my consciousness enough for me to know what's happening. And so it doesn't mean just because something's not necessarily true doesn't mean it comes from nowhere or that it's like complete nonsense. That's definitely not what I want to say. No. It's not like it's nonsense at all. But I do think, especially, I think that we have a responsibility when we are talking about our feeling. I think that we have a responsibility to handle our feelings in a way that doesn't harm other people. And so when we talk about anger, and I think about this a lot, I think we still have a responsibility to work on healing ourselves from what's happened to us so that we don't kind of like pass on those bad things that happen to us, so that we don't pass them on to other people. But at the same time, that work is not instantaneous.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure we would all be like, I'm going to heal my traumas with a snap if we could. And it doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm.
And people take time to work through things that have happened to them. And in a lot of cases, you'll never get there before you die, you know, and I have traumas that have happened to me where I'm not going to be done healing from them forever, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to work on it. And that doesn't mean I'm not going to try to handle the feelings that come up as a result of that with a responsibility, where I'm not trying to push them on or harm other people just because I feel a certain way. And so I think ultimately the reason that people are fighting over the phrase your feelings are valid, and people saying, well, no, not all feelings are valid, has a lot to do with the meme-ification of our discussions about mental health, where obviously in the context of a tweet or a Tumblr post or a screenshot of something on Instagram, you can say the phrase your feelings are valid, and it can be a stand-in for a whole lot of other stuff. But like, there's not room for all of that discussion, you know, and we haven't even had all of the discussion in the context of this podcast. There's lots more to say. There's lots of other people's input that isn't in here. But at the same time, you can see how we've been talking for so long about this one brief sentence that is put into a lot of screenshots and memes, and you're never going to be able to have that full conversation in such a short space. And I think that's where a lot of the fighting comes from, is the fact that I think mental health memes are great. Like, they're awesome. They make me feel better. I love sharing them. I love seeing them. I think they help normalize a lot of feelings. But at the same time, we have to accept and understand their limitations, where you are going to see stuff out there that's really short sentences that's not going to contain the whole conversation, because it can't possibly, because of the format.
Yeah. Well spoken.
I'm just practicing for therapy later.
No. Well, yeah, I mean, this is a topic that I think that we're going to touch on over and over again. I think it's probably even one we'll probably even come back to and speak on again, because it's something that is prevalent in like this culture that we're in, this, you know, depression culture, and the things that, you know, that are out there. And I think that like the stigma behind of like, you know, people arguing between it, like whether or not it's something that is, you know, just one little phrase, and you can end up like having just this whole big thing that happens. But I mean, I hope that, you know, our discussion here a little bit kind of helps people kind of like look at it from a different point of view, or maybe even understand it a little bit.
You guys to think a little bit more about in what ways it's productive for you or healing for you to feel that validity, and if there are ways that it's not productive for you, or it's productive for you to take that second step and be like, but do I want to continue feeling this way? You know, that's a conversation that I think we're starting, but we haven't finished at all. And so we would love to hear from you guys, obviously. If you have thoughts on that, or ways that you tell yourself that your feelings are valid or okay or accepting, or if you choose a different word that you think maybe better encompasses the message that you want to feel towards your feelings.
Yeah, please reach out to us. Let us know. We'd like to create a dialogue with you guys and get everyone talking, you know, because, again, this is the whole reason why we had this podcast. So that way we can start this, you know, this loosening the grips of this taboo around, like, talking about depression and mental health. It's something that's important, and I think that we both agree that it is important, and talking about each other's feelings and things like that is important as well. So if you guys want to reach out to us, please reach out to us. Any of our numerous like ways you can reach out to us, and you know, I appreciate you guys being here. Want to take us home, Chris?
Yeah, well, I'm really glad that we have this space where we can investigate stuff like that. I think this conversation in particular is a really big conversation that, like I was saying before, we have touched on a couple of points and a couple of viewpoints that we have right now in this moment, in this particular place in our journeys, but that doesn't mean that we're going to feel this way forever, and it doesn't mean it's the right answer at all. And I think there's definitely some differences in the nuance of even the ways that Jelani and I would look at this conversation. And I want to be clear, there have definitely been points in my life, especially when I was in the depths of the Great Depression, where the concept of my feelings being valid was so important to me, because I felt like legitimately crazy in a bad way. Like I felt like people were looking at me in the slur version of the word crazy. And so to remember that my feelings were valid and that it was okay to be me and be going through what I was going through, and that there were probably chemical and other emotional trauma reasons that I was going through what I was going through, was so important and helped me stay alive, because I wouldn't have been able to make it through without that validation that it's okay, and that I'm real, and that I'm not insane or making things up. And so I think for you guys, whatever it is that helps you, that should really feed into your mindset about stuff like this, and that might change over time, and you might have a different perspective. And so I really appreciate this space to share our current perspectives, and I hope that we can continue the dialogue with you guys about other perspectives that there might be, or other ways that we can use language and memes in a positive manner, but then also understand that there are limitations to language. Especially if you're speaking between two different people that have different tone or different first languages, or one of you likes memes and one of you doesn't. I think that Yikesland exists. Like, Yikesland is a place, but that doesn't mean that everybody in Yikesland has to be the same.
Yeah, I think everyone's unique, and I think that I think we're all learning from each other, and that's one of the biggest things here that in this discussion that we want to do, is like continue to learn from each other, continue to learn about ourselves as we continue on this journey with each other. So it's a great space, and I appreciate everyone for being here. Chris, I appreciate you being here recording with us. So yeah, thank you so much for being here, guys. Thank you so much for showing up here and making it to another Tuesday. It's really great when you guys do, and I thank you guys so much. This has been your host, Jelani Hu, along with host
Chris Fung.
And hopefully you guys have enjoyed the views from Yikesland, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks for being here. You are not alone. Help is available at the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255.